Okay, we're going to continue working with JavaScript, and we're going to work again with getting and positioning ourselves within the HTML code, and also with objects or events that we're working with. Now notice I have a website up, and I've given you the files for this so you can look at it along as I go with you. Notice that we have pluses, and pluses normally indicate when you click, something's going to expand. If it's a minus and you click on it, it goes back up. So we're going to work with that part first. We'll come to the links and what they do later on. So let's look at a little bit of code. Now when we look at the HTML, we're not really doing much with the HTML. We just have to make sure that we understand that within this HTML document that we do have some unique identifiers in order to position ourselves within the HTML to either add, subtract, or modify classes or styles or anything like that. Now notice that our IDs make us unique. If I create an array based upon the ID's categories, it's going to pull everything from the start of the section to the end of the section and put it in an array that I can work with. Also within that, I can pull out only the H2s that are in that array. So working with getting our elements by ID and also getting our elements by our tag name are things we're going to work with. So again, we have to have something that's unique about these places, such as categories, image, and since we know that IDs can only be applied once, they're wonderful ways to make things unique. Okay, again, we're going to work with the part first that show hides. Okay, now remember, the window onLoad, what exists within that function, automatically executes when the window loads, or anything that's not in a function will execute. All right, first off, we have to build a list of what we might display. Now, as I said, we have our function that returns our position by the element ID that we pass. So here we're building an array called categories based upon where the ID is equal to categories. Now that does position us to that spot, but it also builds our array of all of our elements, again from the start of section all the way to the end of section. Okay, so we have an array of all this information, all these tags. Now I only want to affect the H2 elements. So within that categories array, I only want to get the elements by tag name of H2. And I'm going to fill my H2 elements array. So I have my array of H2 elements, and I'm creating an H2 node that will hold the individual element of the array. So like any array, when we're ready to cycle through, all we have to do is work with our for loop. And we process the length of the array. So here's what we're doing. Okay, remember our events in Java, how we used to register our handlers? Well, we do pretty much the same thing in HTML and JavaScript. So I get one of my elements, and I have my event attached to it. Now when I click on my H2 node, which are these right here, are H2, then I get the current one I've clicked on, put it in H2, and now we're back to our working within our DOM, and some of the methods that are in the library for JavaScript. So for this H2, I can get any attribute of a tag. For H2, I can get any of the attributes of this H2. Of the A tag, the href is an attribute. For an image, the source, the alt, the ID, all of those are attributes. And of course, a class can be an attribute. So here, I want to get the attribute of the H2 class. Now, if that is the word plus, then I'm going to execute the true part, which now sets that attribute to a minus. Now, if this is not true, that means that class is a minus already, and I need to set the attribute of class to plus. Now, that's just displaying the plus or the minus sign. Nothing other than displaying an image. Now, this next part, again, we've got to traverse through the DOM. I'm going to the next element sibling of what I already have on H2. So when I look at this H2, the sibling, since this is closed here, the next one is the div. Remember, to traverse the DOM, if I wanted the UL and I was setting on the div, that's the first child. LI is the first child of the UL. But since LI closes over here, that means that the next LI is the sibling of the first. So I can say next sibling, previous sibling, previous sibling. The anchor tag is the first child of the LI. So we can work on our DOM. Okay. Now, if the next sibling, which is the div, the get attribute class, is equal to close, then that means I need to set it to open. Else, I need to set it to close. Now, if I need to close this, that means that I need to go out and on my link elements, I want the H2's next sibling, first child, child nodes, which is the LIs. Because remember, H2 next sibling is the div. So I'm getting the child. The UL is the child of the div. Again, the next sibling would be the next H2 from this div. Okay? So if this is true, I need to build my link elements from that current div, or current H2 next element sibling, which is my div, first child, which is my UL, child nodes, which are all the LIs. So I'm building the array so I can display it. Okay. Now, to make sure that the area to the right is clear, I find the ID where the ID is equal to image, and I set its source attribute to nothing. Or if I'm on certain versions of IE, I do the same thing, grab the ID, where it's image, and set the attribute for a style to display none, meaning it will not show up. Now again, that takes care of looking at the show, hide, or open, close, versus the plus to the minus. Pause for just a second. Okay, now we're going to go to the next part of it. The part where when I click on a link, I target an area I want this book to show up. Now remember, this image has to be able to be displayed in a unique identifier area. And it closes when I close that. All right, let's look at the code. Now this is a separate function that I'm working with. But again, I do have some areas that I need to make global. They're not set in any other function. So now I'm going back, and it's called list node, and back to my ideas categories. I'm also going to have an image node where I'm going to make the images show up. So it has to be unique, so where the ID equals image. Okay, so I have my areas here. Now I also want to go to all the array that's in the section where the ID is equal to categories. I want to pull out the elements that have a tag name of A, my anchors or my A hrefs. And again, I'm putting them in another array. I want to be able to work with these individual, so I have my variables for my loop to work with the individuals and a picture, an image. So here we go, to cycle through all of them again, a for loop. I take my link node, which is an individual, and put my individual element in my link node. Now that I have my individual, I've got to tell it when I click on that or .onClick that I'm going to run a function, and this is the event that's coming through. Okay. I get my current link, and when I go back and look at these, the href is holding my image of my book, and I have the clickable area. So I need to get the attribute for the href, and make it show up in my image node, which remember is the place where ID equals image. I get the href, so whatever's between the quotes and href equals, I'll put it in the attribute source of my image node. So I look at the HTML. That is what is pulling out the image node. So again, the source, which is right here, is set to that. Okay. One last item. If your tag has default processes, then in order for me to utilize and have my own processes, I have to prevent those default processes. So, if it's not an event, then I set my event to whatever my window event is. If that event has a prefit default member, then I need to call its function from the library. If there's no processes to prevent, then I just tell it false. Now we already know what happens when we click here. That's not normally happens whenever you click on a link. It doesn't show this nice, neat little placement here with a thumbnail. What usually happens here, let's comment these out so we'll know what we're talking about. So now when I save this, I've commented out this default, preventing the default, and look what happens. Expand, click. Well, normally our link takes up the entire page unless I tell it different. So I want to prevent this default process. I only want to show the book image. So I've got to prevent the actions or the processes of the link. And then, of course, I'm loading the attribute for the href in memory. Don't have to hit the drive as much. Saves time. I hope this helps you. Thank you very much. Good luck. Go on.